I got my new thing imported. I got the Christian Dior. They wanna look at the foreign. They couldn't even afford it. Look what I did with the bag. Look what I did with the bag. I got a thing in the back, and I ain't taking no chat. I got my new thing imported. I got the Christian Dior. They wanna look at the foreign. They couldn't even afford.
Follow us on Instagram at Express Truth Show.
Welcome back, people. It's the Express Truth Show, making Thursdays great again. And before we do anything today, I want to say a big, massive shout out to the Patreon crew and the website crew. People, do not forget to check out our website, www.expresstruthshow.com. Now, today, people, we have a special guest, very special guest, but we're going to introduce Stephen in a second, but we got a very special guest. A lot of people have asked for this episode, so we've delivered the episode, and that's it. We was going to ask for some pre-questions, but we decided last minute not to do it. So before we introduce our special guest, let me introduce my co-host, Stephen Brown. Stephen, how's it going, man?
I can't complain, making Thursdays great again, never late again. Dynamic duo back in full effect. Yeah, you're right. Very special guest in the building this evening. I don't feel like we needing any more questions though, man. Came up with some solid ones regardless.
Yeah, definitely. It's a different, obviously people have seen now, it's a different side today. That's it. So let me introduce my guest, a very special guest, also happens to be my mom. But to the majority of you guys out there, you would know her as the first Black and the first female, or the first woman, because I know some people get offended by female, MP from Birmingham, Paulette Hamilton.
Good evening, Mark, and good evening, Stephen. I'm really delighted that you've invited me here tonight. I know we've been meaning to do this for a while, but nothing happens before it's time.
Well, we're definitely honored to have you in the building. 100%. A lot of people didn't think it would happen, because the show's sometimes controversial.
Yeah.
But, we're not here to talk about any of that. So,
well, the thing is, the controversy, you've got to deal with that. But for me, you've asked me here to talk about me and to talk about who is that person behind Paulette Hamilton, the MP. And I hope tonight in this hour, I'll share it with you because I'm open. You've known me all my life. You've known all my bad tempers. You know when I'm in a good mood. You know when you need to stay away from me. Mark, you know me because you're my one and only son. So, of course, I would do this interview.
Well, Mommy, me and Stephen are honored to have you here.
100%.
Definitely honored to have you here. So what we want to do is just get into your mind, basically what the side people don't see.
Yeah.
All right. So what I want you to do is, because there's a lot of this stuff I don't know myself, I want you to take us on a journey of your upbringing.
Yeah.
Okay. And then go through your upbringing and then we'll intervene where we intervene. So how did things start out for you?
Right. I was born in an hospital in East Birmingham called Artlands. It's now called Artlands Hospital. And I grew up, my mom said I started the first 2 years of my life in Ockley. We lived in Ockley in rented accommodation. And then my mom and dad brought me to Answorth, where we live till this day in Answorth. Now, things were very hard for my parents when we were growing up. There was 4 of us, Andrew, Lorna, Dorothy, and myself. And then my sister, my older sister, Amelia, she joined us some years later. Although things were very hard, we rented out the front room. We were a tight-knit family. We had our auntie, and my auntie also had 5 children, and my uncle. And we never did things without each other. We were really tight. But also, we had very good neighbours that still live there to this day that would help my mom as we were growing up, and mom was going to work. And as a child, what I've always remembered, mom would go to work during the day, and then my dad would work at night, so they could look after us themselves. And in the morning when my dad would come in from work, he would always, the youngsters on this program might not know, he'd always cook. We'd always have a cooked breakfast to go to school. And he would always make something called Johnny cakes, which was very large fried dumplings, which I adore. And anybody that knows me to this day, I love fried dumplings, but I cannot eat them because if I eat them, I would look like the back of a house. So I limit myself to what I actually eat. But I love Caribbean fried dumplings, and that has come from my dad because that's something my dad used to do when we were growing up. We didn't have much money when we were growing up. We didn't have much money at all. And as a child, I always remembered we had to work hard for whatever we wanted. And when I went to school, you know, people talk about prejudices and racism. The first time I met racism was actually when I realized it was racism was at school.
But mommy, hold on.
Yeah.
You're moving too fast.
Okay.
You're moving too fast. And remember, you know, Stephen, you can interject, you know.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
listen, I'm
you're moving
taking
too
the
fast.
journey.
All right. Well, let me go back to
All right, so where
Yeah.
I would want to, where I want you to go now. So you grew up, your mom, your dad, your siblings. So what was that time like in the UK? What was it like?
What period was it?
Yeah,
That was in the 60s. It
Okay.
was very, very hard. It was hard. And the reason it was hard is because as Black people, we had to face quite a lot of racism out there in the community. But we were shielded from that because of our mom and dad. But we faced a lot of racism and people didn't want Black people living next to them. And we couldn't go to, I as a child, I could always remember my mom and dad didn't actually go to parties as such or go to nightclubs because they weren't able to. So my dad used to have something called a blue spot gram, and they would play music in the house or they would go to the bingo back in the early days when we were very, very young. And that's how they used to have, and they'd go to the pub, if I remember rightly, as we were growing up. But they had to make entertainment for themselves. And this is why Christmas and Easter and holidays like that were very important, because it was a time where families would come together and they would share. And on a Sunday, it was a time when families would come together and they would share. And even though they didn't have very much, they would share and they would work together to ensure that no one go to bed hungry or go to bed wanting. We never had, as I've said, much money. So you'd get an outfit in the spring and summer. You'd get a couple of outfits or an outfit at Christmas. You'd get a winter coat. You'd get your 2 school uniforms. And that was it. And you'd have to learn to wash, rewear, or hand-me-downs from. So the older child would have hand down to the second, to the third, and mom made it work. And my mom was really good, and I've taken that mantle. She was really good at crocheting and knitting, that sort of thing. And she taught me how to crochet and how to knit. And she'd knit little skirts for us to help us to make ends meet as we were growing up. So the point I'm trying to make is there was not a lot of money, but my childhood was happy. We didn't go to bed hungry. We didn't go to bed feeling that we wanted for anything. And we knew that we were loved. And also when you left the house, I know you don't want to talk about growing up, but when you left the house in the neighborhood, you had to be careful what you did, because if the neighbors saw, they would have a go at you. And then when you got back home, before you got home, God knows how your parents would know, but they would know what you'd been up to, and you could get into trouble again because they'd have a go. And God help you if you responded to an elder and said something rude or not very nice. Your parents would really have a go. So my parents were no different to others. They expected you to be seen, not to be heard. You weren't allowed to join in to any conversations, and you were expected as children to know your place as a child. They loved you, but they made sure that you understood the rules of engagement while growing up.
Yeah.
And most young people, I think, or I believe, and I was definitely one of them, understood that you had to be circumspect. So you were there, but you were not there because an adult was there, an adult was talking. So as a child, you had to keep quiet. So my upbringing was very, and something else from my early days, when other people were allowed to go out on the street and little things like that, we weren't allowed to. My mom and dad were really strict like that. They didn't like us on the road. She just didn't. And my mom made a big thing of that. So we very much had to stay within the confines of the house, the garden, or just stand at the front. And if you did manage to get away for a few hours and do something stupid and they found out, you wouldn't move for another few weeks. You'd be grounded in the house and they didn't want to know. Also, now you've all got phones and you've all got, the kids have got iPads and what have you. We had one phone in the front room and it was locked. And if you wanted to speak to a friend or foe or whoever, they had to ring you. And when they rang you, you had a certain period of time where you could talk to them. Then mom would say, come off that phone now. But you couldn't ring out on the phone. And back in the days when I was very young, we didn't have a television as such. We had a television, but you had to clock. You had to, like a meter, you had to clock for the television. Yes. So it meant that parents they limited you a great deal as to what you can do. It's not like now everybody's got a telly in their bedroom and no. There was a telly in the living room or the dining room area where people sat down and you were limited to how much you could watch that television because it was metered. And once that money had finished, no more was going in. And no matter how good you think that program was, that was it. You had finished for the night.
All right, Mommy, 1 second. Just one sec. Because it's flowing so perfectly. But you see, as you're just talking now, we're already almost 15 minutes.
Yeah, we've got to speed up.
No, we don't have to speed up. I'm saying it's really good to see look how you're just flowing. So I can know where my talent comes from.
Okay.
Even on being on the podcast. Because look how you can just flow. But we're going to get back to the story. Stephen.
I just wanted to quickly kind of chime in and ask, from you recanting your childhood, it definitely feels like there's a generational gap. Yeah. So it feels like a lot of values haven't been passed down to today's generation. So, for example, not back chatting elders or your neighbors being able to tell you off and all of that. Like you try that with a child now, they'll call you all kinds of names, call you outside of your name.
But Stephen, I'm going to chime in as you've put. I'm going to say the issue is, and I blame my generation, what we did, what our parents taught us, because we felt they were so strict, we started to rebel and we felt that we didn't want to put our children through what we'd gone through. And I feel we went too much the other way. Okay. And to the extent where our children, the values that we were brought up with, our children, as the generations have gone on, they've lost those values. It's because I felt trapped. If there's even though I was loved and even though I did everything that was asked of me, I felt trapped. I felt as if I didn't start to get my freedom until literally I met my husband and I moved out from the house. And even that was a drama within itself because you just never did anything when I was growing up without drama. You know, if you went out for the evening and my dad would say, you have to be back in, and people of a certain age will understand this, you have to be back in by 10 o'clock. Oh, my life. The party was just starting at 10 o'clock. And because I grew up in church and then I was breaking away from the church mold to start going to parties, when Dad said you have to be back by 10 or 11 o'clock, I'd got another sister who was, she didn't listen. And we would go out and we would always try and push it and push it and push it till this one night we pushed it just a little bit too far and my dad locked us out. We ended up staying out for most of the night and there we moved from that doorstep. And then what he did about 4 hours later, he came downstairs. And what he then did, he opened the front door. He let us in, shut the front door, locked the front door, and went to his bed. But he had left us outside for most of the night. And he didn't think anything of it. You know, that is what, but that is what my dad was like. When he said something, he wasn't saying it to your detriment. He was saying it because that's what he wanted. He was the adult. He was in charge. If you don't listen, you don't live under his roof.
Which we're gonna get back to.
Yeah.
We're gonna get back to. That's my granddad that you're speaking about. So rest in peace to.
Yeah, he's passed away now.
Solomon.
But he taught me a lot.
Yeah, me as well. So, how far back in your schooling can you remember? How early can you remember in school?
I can remember right back to my junior infant school. I went to Wilkes Green round the corner from where we live. It's now called William Murdoch. It's still open. And my brother's children go there now. And when I went to school, where I went to school, I felt, and this is my perception, that there was not very high expectations of the black children.
Now, when you say you felt like that, what made you feel that way?
Because of certain things that they'd say and certain things, how they would treat us. Because if we had a book to read, sometimes I'd feel that because at home we had to share everything, where some children would have the opportunity to do far more reading because they went to the library or what have you. They'd spend more time with those children.
Yeah.
Whereas I felt, and as I said, it was my perception that they didn't give us as much time. So if we misbehave in the class, the first course of action was to throw us out the class. If you're out of the class, you're not learning. And that's what they used to do. And I remember the one day I was in junior school, and this one teacher, he said to me, "You will never amount to anything." And sometimes when people say things to you, right, you don't realize that it has got the impact that it has. But I carried that with me because as a child, when somebody says to you, "You will never amount to anything, all you're fit for is to have babies."
Yeah.
And at the time, that word hit me really hard. And I started to follow what I was said to me. So I have always had a bit of a mouth. And my mom and my dad used to always say, "Paulette, God has given you 2 ears, 2 nostrils, 2 eyes, and 1 mouth." And I remember a nursing sister also saying that to me. Learn to shut that. Learn to shut your mouth. But it was really, really difficult not to want to clap back, to have a go, because I felt hurt. So when I was told that by the teacher, and remember in the school I went to as a youngster, there was only ever one other black teacher in that school. There was no black teachers. There were no.
Let me just interject there, as we'll do throughout. So when you said there was only one other black teacher, what was your rapport like with that teacher? Meaning, like, was that teacher? Did that teacher have your best interests?
The black teacher, yes.
Okay.
And she tried to feed in some of the negative that were fed elsewhere. She tried to feed in positives. And up until she died last year, I still get on with her children now, and they are the same. But this particular teacher was awesome. She was somebody that had to work really hard to get a position and keep a position in a school that was openly quite racist, in my opinion, looking back on the way the school was at that time. The expectations of the children were not very high. They didn't expect you to go anywhere. And I've got to be honest, Mark, I might be rushing along, but the same,
I'll take your time.
the same happened when you entered secondary school. So you entered the first
Hold
year.
on, mommy, we're building
Yeah.
a picture. So, and remember,
Okay.
Stephen,
Interject.
I
Just
know,
tell
I'm just listening, man.
Yeah,
When you
no,
know to me
the
talking,
story-
I'm listening, man.
because I know my mom's story is amazing. So
That's
as
what I'm
it's
just
going
talking.
on, we'll just interject.
I'm soaking
So
like a sponge, man.
when you were going through second primary school, were there any key moments? Because like you said, the teacher said that to you, and it clearly hurt you because I've heard that myself from you before. So when the teacher said that to you, yeah, what happened? How did you take that? How did you finish primary school? Did you finish primary school on a negative level, or did you put your head down?
No, totally negative. I switched off completely. I thought, well, if they don't care, why should I? But I wasn't. In my own mind, I just wanted to get out of there because I just felt that they didn't have my best interest at heart, and I just didn't know how to show them. I told you so. I told you I could do more than you have predicted that I will ever do. And it has always remained with me because it was a negative part of my life. I've had other experiences, but that's the one that really stuck with me. Because another thing, in my day, you used to get smacked with a ruler.
Yeah.
And they'd smack you on your hand and what have you. And I was constantly, they would give me, like, I'd be talking and somebody, and he'd say, and they'd give you a ruler smack or whatever. And that just hardened me. And so I learned very early on, if you hit children, if you beat children, if you hit them, all you're doing is hardening them. You are not helping them, because they then just switch off, and nothing you then tell them are they going to listen to, because they just feel you've held that opinion as an adult and you can go and do one. So this is why I've always felt, if I can, even though I can be a bit bad-tempered, but that's me hormones, but
On a personal level.
on a
so that's
personal
nothing-
level.
Yeah.
But on a professional level, I've always felt if you can talk to a young person, you can change their life. If you can talk positive into a young person, you can change their life, because positive breeds positive. Negative breeds negative. And that's why I always think to myself, with our young people, as they're growing, I remembered when I was growing and how negative I was. But that broke later on. I'll stop there, but that did break later
I just went,
on.
I was just waiting so I could jump in like a cat. So, are you totally against physically hitting children?
Yeah.
You don't feel it works at all?
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It just hardens them.
Even a really unruly pick of them?
No, doesn't work, and that makes it worse.
Okay. So you just advise
I just
positive
advise,
reinforcement and stuff?
yeah, that's what I advise, and separation. I always find with my grandchildren, and I love them dearly, you ask Mark if they're misbehaving, and
That's the truth.
Mark says to me, I said, bring them to me.
That's
And
the truth.
And I sit them down and I talk to them. I might take them shopping.
They get spoiled. They get spoiled.
But I sit them down and I talk to them and I say, what is going on with you? And I stop. And then my area of discussion is in the kitchen, over the kitchen, in the kitchen, the counter.
Yes.
So I put them to sit on the counter while I'm cooking. And as I'm cooking, I'll say, what is wrong? And they'll start talking. And when I start asking them questions and they can see that I'm listening, you start to hear what the issues are. And I always positively reinforce with children, they're beautiful, they're of God, they're the most gorgeous thing on God's earth. And I love them and I kiss them, especially my grandchildren, and they love it. because it is positive reinforcement. You know, if you tell somebody how beautiful they are, I believe I'm the most beautiful woman in the world. You can't tell me I'm not.
That's where I get it from as well.
You cannot tell me I am not gorgeous because I'm not listening to you. When I walk in a
best way
room,
to be.
I believe I am absolutely lovely. And that's because throughout my adult life, I've had that positive reinforcement and as growing up, but my husband has always said, yeah, you look good today. Yeah, Paulette, you're looking gorgeous.
Yeah, let
And
some pat rock come out, mum, and let people see, man.
Starting them, man.
I have got like a really, really good husband who absolutely and utterly adores me. And
He does.
even
He does.
if I look terrible in my dressing gown or what have you, he will say something positive. And that for me, when I get dressed up and I'm going out, I feel good. And that's what I do with my grandchildren. And that's what I say to my children. Don't allow other people to define you. You've got to define yourself. And I've learned that from some of the lessons I've grown up when people have tried to say, and also other children have tried to say, perhaps I don't look as good as they do, or I haven't got the figure they've got, or whatever it may be. And if you allow that to be what is your story, you will then follow that.
True.
And I've learned over the years that you can't allow other people to define who you are.
That's the truth. And just before we get to
Excellent
the story,
advice.
so what I will say to the listeners and even you, Stephen, because you know this as well, because since my mom's been in London, you see how much more the kids are not there like that. But that's the truth. Me, I can get angry, tell them off, whatever, but if they go to my mom, they always come back changed. So that's why I'm trying to learn that approach as well, especially with girl, child, as you know.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, secondary school.
Yeah.
Take us through, from the earliest you can remember, and just talk us through secondary school. How was that? Positive and negative.
The first 2 years were horrendous. I was always in trouble. I was in the bottom classes. I was scraping on the bottom, not expected to pass a single GCSE, and absolutely playing up as a teen, early teens. And I had a teacher called Mr. Potter. And Mr. Potter used to have a pipe. In those days, they could smoke in the school. And he used to have a pipe. And he said to me, Paulette, I can see something in you that just needs to be channeled to come out. And so what he did, he went to the headmistress and he said to her, I want Paulette moved from the bottom class to the top. She will either sink or swim. Now, anybody that knows me don't give me that challenge because I will swim. And so in year 7, year 8, my mom was constantly coming up to school because I would not have the right uniform. Not because mommy wasn't buying the right uniform, but because I always tried to push the boundaries, or I'd be talking and they sent me out the classroom, or I'd be doing some other stupidness, and just, it wasn't hardcore bad behavior, but it was that type of behavior that was bordering on. If it carried on, I would end up with a bad crowd, that perhaps I would start doing things I shouldn't do and would end up being where I shouldn't be. So when I then moved to the top class, I then started to mix with different girls. Now, at home, 3 of us shared a bedroom. Now, it was really tough because 3 of us shared a bedroom, and after a certain time, you had to switch the light off, and I needed to study. And I had no way of studying at that time in that place. So what I used to do, and I do it to today, and you know this, Mark, I used to always go to sleep at 9 o'clock whenever we went to bed, and I'd wake up at 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And then I'd do my homework, I'd do my reading, I'd start to study because the house was quiet and I was able to do it then. And I do it to this day because it's an habit that I picked up as a teenager. That led to me channeling some of that extra energy into books, into studying, into trying to forge an education. But what you have to understand, in my formative years, I'd sort of missed bits because of getting into trouble. This is why every day spent at school is valuable. Every day you lose out of the classroom is a negative, because it means, it doesn't matter how simple it is, you are missing something. So as a 13, 14-year-old, I then had to try and catch up. So the teachers would give extra work, they would give extra support, and I just absolutely lapped it up, because it meant then that energy that I had, because I was talented, I was bright, but no one had ever told me that before. So I always believed that I really wasn't very talented and I wasn't very bright. And I remember, and I will share this with you, that when I was a little bit, not at that point, but just before, I remember my mom saying, "I'm not even sure you can read." And that thing absolutely broke my heart. And I thought, Mom, how could you say you don't know if I can read? But because they were so busy working and providing, they hadn't got time to do the little things which were important to find out, can that child actually do what she needs to do? And as I started to grow and pick up, and Mark will tell you, this is why I believe the values around reading to children. When my children were growing up, whenever I could, before they got to bed, whenever they had their books, I would sit them down while plaiting one hair, listening to another. Mark will tell you I was very good at multi-skilling, but I always believed you had to give every child time. And the time you give them is when you learn, where is that child at? And so as I started going through secondary school, I was quietly absorbing and learning. And even though I was a little bit behind the other girls that were there, I was determined to do well. And I did. So I got to fifth form and did my CSCs, O levels at that time. And I got 6 of them. And the school they could not believe it, that I'd managed to attain it, but I didn't get my English. And that's because of some of the missing structure that I'd got from earlier on. So I carried on at school, but my dad then said to me, "Paulette, if you want to stay on at school, you got to work." And I said, "Dad, I can't work and study." But he was insistent. So I then went and found a little job at the co-op. And that's when I started working. And people who understand my age group, I started doing my little bottom drawer for when I left home. So I went to the co-op and I would do a Friday night and Saturday. And that meant that I had a bit of money in my pocket and I could carry on studying at school during the week. And I got through the 2 years of my A-levels. And then the choices at that time for people like myself, because I didn't do that well with my A-levels at that time, were secretarial work, becoming a teacher, or a nurse. So I then decided I would become a nurse. I didn't really want to be a nurse, but I thought out of the 3, that's the one that most suited me. I started my nursing. I worked with the co-op till my dates came to go into nursing. Started my nursing and I was pregnant. And I found out I was pregnant. I was absolutely shocked. And I thought,
How old was you this time?
about 19.
Okay.
And we then had, it's my husband now, we then had my first child. But I had to
Nicola,
go.
Nicola, I hope you're listening.
And we had my first child, and then I went back home and I got thrown out of nursing. So when I got thrown out of nursing, after I had the baby, I thought, what do you do now? Paulette, what do you do with your life now? You've had the baby, you're not married, you're back home, there's 3 people in the room, you there with a baby.
Hold on. Yeah, go on, Stephen. Go on.
Why did you get thrown out of why did you get thrown off nursing?
Because in those days, if you hadn't worked for more than, I think it's a year, they didn't give you maternity leave. They chucked you off the course.
So
you had to work. It was cutthroat. In those days, jobs didn't have the same maternity rights or the same benefits as they've got now.
Let me just jump back in. So, because this is new to me, I've never really asked this, but when you say you went back home,
yeah.
So what happened with Daddy? He couldn't.
No, I was living in the nurse's home.
Okay.
And so when I had to go on to when they it was time to go on maternity leave.
Yeah.
There was nowhere to go but back home. So I went back home in Answorth.
And how did your dad take that?
He was really good. It was my mom.
Okay.
My mom at the beginning was shell-shocked at the fact that I was having a baby and that stuff. And she also at the beginning, many people will not understand. Back in the day, when you went out with brothers that were Rastas.
Yeah, because my dad is a... Wait, Mom, you can't say that so fast.
Yeah. Okay.
We need the details, man. You can't just glaze like a Christian.
So I grew up with a father that is of Rastafarian...
heritage.
Culture.
Culture, yeah.
Yeah, so continue.
So basically, my husband has always had locks. So my dad accepted that. But at the beginning... Mom had an issue with that because of the cultural background she'd come from in the Caribbean. And she had a problem with that. But nevertheless, we kept on going.
Which is why, sorry, my man, this is another, I gotta jump in. Yeah. That part of the reason why I don't use the word dreadlocks is because of that.
Yeah.
That's why I don't call it dreadlocks.
Yeah.
No, you heard me say that, Stephen. It's because of them days. Because my dad had a hard time.
Yeah, at the
There's
beginning.
There's nothing good about it though, man.
Yeah. But look, you've got locks now.
I've got locks now. But my mom would have absolutely died if I'd had locks at 18.
Because, mommy, let's just tell it as it is. In them days, Rastas were looked upon by the elder generation as dirty.
Yeah, I've always heard that. Do you know the reason behind that?
It's to do with Jamaica and how Rastas came through in Jamaica. And you'd got the one generation that were older, and then you got this new group of young people. You know, like you then have other groups come through after. But when the Rastas were coming through, the older generation, they never liked them. Them natty head boy, them nasty, they this, they that. They just didn't like them. Now, I'm not telling you my mom thought like that because I'd be lying, but she had issues with that at the beginning.
It was just bad habits from Jamaica.
Yeah, it was just learned behavior from the Caribbean.
Okay.
And so when we had the first baby, and my mom thought, well, she isn't going to leave him. Because in those days, I suppose I was never one to jump from man to man. So my husband, I'd known him a good while by this time, and I'd finished school. I'd started my nursing. I then got pregnant, and my husband, well, he's my husband now. I went to live back home, but it was really difficult living back at home and having my husband, not because of his locks, but mommy, as you asked me the question, she struggled with the fact that I was having a baby, and then that I was having a baby for somebody who was a Rastafarian in that time. But to be fair on her, once she knew the time was coming and I was going to have this baby, she jumped into action and started supporting, helping, making sure things were in place. And because I didn't have a clue at that point in my life. And so she helped then. But then I lived at home. But it was really hard because even though I was having a baby and then I had a baby, my husband couldn't come further than the front room. And I remember when Nicola was a bit older, I asked them if I could go and spend the weekend with my husband with the baby. And I was told I can go myself, but I'm not taking their granddaughter to any man's house. And he was my husband. Well, he was my partner.
He's the father of the child.
Yeah, but they weren't having different times.
Definitely. 100%.
And to cut a long story short, I then got the got upset, did a Paulette, and went to, those of you that are old enough will have heard of somewhere called Bush House in town, and got a place of my own. I literally got a key. This place was dreadful. It was awful. It was I think it was 2 or 3 bedroom masonette in Lee Bank in a place called Ingleton House.
That's where my story started, but we'll get back to that.
We would used to, you climbed the stairs and all you smelt was urine.
Oh, Lord.
It was dreadful, but it was mine. And I loved it for the time I was there.
Yes, people, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It's Dynamic Duo and Full Effect, your favorite podcast. At the top, it's just us, man. Oh, yeah.
I didn't have any furniture. The stuff I'd bought for the bottom drawer, I took there with me. We bought some carpets, and we started off with cushions on the floor. And as you went along, and by this time, I'd got back into nursing. But it was hard. It was a hard time in our life, but it was a happy time.
All right, so this is an important part now. So you just said something very, very important. You said it was a very hard time, but it was a happy time. So can you elaborate on that? How you can be going through a hardship, but still happy at the same time?
Yeah, good question.
Because people in today's world
don't know nothing about
they
that.
don't know nothing about that.
We didn't have a lot of money, but me and my husband now, we were happy. We were going towards something. We'd got Nicola. We were in a little place of our own. Dennis had started his business. He'd got a little business. We weren't earning any money, but I was going out and working. He was going out and working. And we could see where if we start to save, and those of you that are old enough, we'd always been in something called a partner. And what we used to do is we would drop one hand, he would drop another hand. And as we get our drawers, we could then buy a wardrobe. We could then buy a settee. We could then buy a wall unit. And I know it sounds difficult now, but in those days, it was very difficult to get loans off banks. You couldn't get credit very easily and things were hard. So you had to do what your parents did, and that was save the money. So we used to be in like work with the community to just help each other out in that way. And it worked for us. So even though a difficult time, we were starting out, and the first year living together is hell, but you get through it. But we were happy, and we've always been happy as a couple, because when you meet the right person, you know that's the right person. So through thick and thin, you and that person are together and you're making life together. So it was a hard year because we didn't have much money. It was a hard few years because we didn't have a lot of furniture. We didn't have a lot of things, but it was a good time because we were happy, we were together, and we were building.
Okay.
All right. Go on.
So you're in the house now. You got one child. You're with what's my father.
Yeah.
You're building. You're happy. You're building. What happens next? How do you get back into nursing? And how does that run end?
Well, what happened was after I had the baby, I went to work at Bush House because my husband doesn't like this story, but I will share it. When the baby was about 4 or 5 months old, I said to my husband, now husband, boyfriend, partner.
Just
at the
say
time,
husband then everyone
Yeah,
knows.
it's fine, it's fine.
Right? I said to my husband, I said, Dennis, can I have some money? And you know what he did? He asked me what for. So those of you that know me well, it took me all the energy I'd got to even ask him. And the fact that he didn't just take it out his pocket and give it to me, but he thought to say to me, what for? I found a job that week. Didn't have to ask him again. It wasn't an issue after that. So I then went back to work when Nicola was about 5 months, and I went to work for somewhere called Bush House. Now, at that time, as I've said, got a big mouth, talk too much, probably get into arguments. I was fiery, hormones raging, and got into a few altercations at Bush House with other members of staff. So they moved me out to a place called Botville Road. And Botville Road was an area of the city, I think it was Yardley side, I'm not sure, to take me out the way. And basically, it was just, in those days, you never had the computer system. So it was papers everywhere. And the one day I looked at the papers and I knew I couldn't do it for another day. So what happened was I'd applied to go back into nursing.
Yeah.
And I was waiting to start. And I just lost my temper. I threw the papers up. I left the place and I never went back. So I left that job. And then my nursing, they accepted me back into nursing. But unfortunately, it was at a lower grade. And I started my enroll nurse training. When I started my enroll nurse training, within 6 months, if that, I was pregnant with you. And then I thought they're going to throw me out again. But this time, because I'd worked a bit longer and I got over the year, they let me have maternity leave. But maternity leave was 11 weeks. It was 11 weeks. And then I had to go back to work. So I did it. And I literally, and I was very ill after March, but I did it. And I took the time off before, I think it was 6 weeks before and something like 10 weeks after. It was very little time. But I went back to work when Mark was 11 weeks old. And Mark went into a nursery. And
Wasn't it the Marcus Garvey nursery?
Yeah, in Handsworth. Right. And I remember it was really, really tough because I lived in Lee Bank. I had to travel to go and take him to nursery, then go to work. And I literally finished my training and within months, I was pregnant again. And we had Keisha. There's less than 2 years between Keisha and Mark. And
so we're like twins, basically.
Yeah.
Is the dress the same?
And, and then I had Keisha, but I kept on going. So after Keisha, I'd worked a little bit longer, accumulated a little bit more time, and then I was able to take off, I think about 5 months off work this time, or 6 months it may have been at the time. But the point I'm trying to say, those of you that are at work now and you're in your season of having babies, that will come to an end at some point. So those people who aren't having babies yet or have had their babies, they have to be tolerant of young moms because we all go through it. And I went through it. I was breastfeeding. I used to have to rush from work and I had to go and find nursery to breastfeed baby. I was expressing milk. I had buggies. It was horrendous. But the babies were here and they needed to be looked after. And then we went through a period of time where I didn't have any more babies. I think the difference between you and between Keisha and Kyra is about 6 years. So we then had about 6 years. So we started going on holidays. I started taking them away, because another thing I believe in is exposing the next generation to possibilities, what they can do, places they can go, what they can see, how they can learn. And so whatever I do, I make it a learning experience for them, because it's no good. What saddens me is when young people tell me they don't leave a certain postcode, because the world is so big. It is so beautiful. There is so much you can do.
Mommy, let me quickly interject, because I know what you're saying, but
Yeah.
this is, you and Daddy
Yeah.
are probably, outside of like famous people that I know, you're the most traveled people that I know.
Facts.
Meaning you've been everywhere in the world. Everywhere you've been, there's not many places you haven't been. And I've took that from you, because that's where my love of travel comes from.
But
From traveling with you
But
guys.
with
as
me,
well.
it was because I didn't travel when I was growing up. I didn't want that to be the same experience for you guys. So I am well traveled. And the reason I'm well traveled, one, because the jobs I've had during my life have enabled me to experience
You're the only
countries.
black person I know who's been in India.
Oh, right.
You've
Okay.
been, my mom's been to
Oh,
the
you've
Taj.
been to India?
My mom's been to
visited-
the, not just to go on holiday. They
I went
paid her
for
to go.
work. I went for work.
Taj
and-
Mahal and
yeah.
everything.
Yeah, because remember, that's on the list. That's one of the top cities that
Yeah.
listen to us.
Yeah. So I went,
True.
India is one of the most beautiful places in the world. I went
Add
to
it to the
Pune,
list.
and I really, really enjoyed it. I've been to China. I remember the
Singapore,
first time,
Australia.
Singapore, Australia,
That's
because
it,
I
yeah.
just, I always
Business
believe
class though, that flight.
expose yourself to new experiences and you will grow. But I've worked hard. Some parts of my life, I've had 2 jobs. Sometimes I've had, because I do believe, the youngsters, they talk about streams of earning. They're right. You cannot allow one job to define who you are. So as someone coming through, I've always been a hard worker. So it means I can enjoy what I earn. So I've always worked hard. But going back to where I am, we then had Mark, we had Keisha, we started traveling as a family, and then we had Kyra.
No,
Leah.
mama, we completely going
Oh,
too
me.
far ahead.
Okay,
So
go on.
where we was at is, you went back into nursing.
Yeah.
How did you leave that job? Because you was a nurse, you were making good money.
Yeah.
For them days, by that time you'd already bought a house.
Yeah, I had.
You had a husband who had a business that was on its way at the time.
Yeah.
Like he was young
Shout
at the
out,
time.
man.
Yeah. And then you left nursing.
All right.
So how did that happen? Tell me how that happened, because
How
we're gonna
and why?
right.
Yeah.
That's a little bit to do with Kai. Right. I was a jobbing nurse. So I became a nursing sister, and then I went to work for the unions. But once I had Danica, which was my last child, 22 years ago, I knew I couldn't carry on doing full-time nursing. Reason being, it was just too tough with 5 children. It was hard enough with 4, but when I had the 5th, I knew that I had to find a different way. But what I did was, I didn't leave nursing. I left the pit face, so left district nursing and hospital nursing and ward work. I left that behind and I went to work for the unions. So I started off by doing a job in sickle cell thalassemia, and I worked there for about 12, 18 months. And then I jumped over into the Royal College of Nursing because I knew that it was time to move. Because with me, as anybody who knows me, I pray about things. And if I'm feeling restless, what I try not to do is move when I'm in that frame of mind. I stay still. There's a Bible saying, "Be still and know that I am God." Sometimes when it's time for you to make that move, deep down, you know it's the right time to move, but you want to move to the right place. So what had happened was, I had been doing nursing. I'd been working 14, 15 hours a day, and I got pregnant with Danica. And deep down, I knew I couldn't carry on as a jobbing nurse because I had too many children and I needed to cut my hours down. But it was the best move I ever made. So I decided to use my skills that I had been taught as a nurse, and I'd carried on studying, and by this time I'd got a degree and one thing or another. And so I decided to use the skills that I had learned as a nurse and as a manager and put it into other areas. So I went to work for the Royal College of Nursing, and that was a really massive learning curve for me. It learned me discipline. It learned me, that's where I started really traveling, because the job was a regional role. I could get up today. I was on Agley Road. Tomorrow I would be in Hereford. Another day I'd have to take a plane to Scotland. I've ended up one day, if you remember, in Belfast. I went all over, you know, like a national type thing, even though it was a regional role. But it taught me that I was about to start moving. So in the sickle cell role, they sent me to Athens.
Yeah.
And it was the first time I'd ever traveled for work. And I was just in awe of it. And but I knew that a new pipeline was opening. So in the roles that I'd had, it would mean it would incorporate traveling. Then as I worked with the Royal College of Nursing, it incorporated more traveling. So it meant you had to be disciplined. When other people were raving and doing what they were doing, you had to be in bed. You had to study to show yourself approved. If you had to do any conference and talking, you had to understand what you were talking about. So it was constant studying, learning, as well as bringing up a family. So I did all of that. And then every job I had subsequently meant more traveling. Yeah. So I had to learn that as part of my roles, that part of it would be traveling. And as you said, as we laughed about earlier, I went all over the place. Somebody contacted me just off the cuff and said, Paulette, we want to take you to South Korea. You've been Chicago?
Yeah. At the height of the drill movement for work? At the height of the drill movement? Well, you don't know what that is, but yeah.
Yeah. And then I remember I then went to Chicago. I remember how upset I was, if you remember when I came back.
Yeah.
I was just gutted at what I was seeing about the deaths and what was going on in Chicago. But I really, really struggled with what they were going through because it showed me. Then we had in between riots in the UK. So 2011, when they absolutely decimated my husband's business, and me and Mark and Dennis were outside the business. And I remember asking this one young man, why have you smashed up the shop? And he said, because we can. No, it was just a sign of the times we were in. And what I'm trying to say to you, each experience, I have grown from it. The traveling, the change of roles, transitioning from nursing to politics.
All right. Let me just, you see, I wait for my moment. There's two things I wanted to ask before you even continue that. I just want to, it seems like the more I'm hearing you talk and recount your story and give us the breakdown of your come up in life, I'm just seeing the gap between the generations, because you keep saying things like it was hard, but we were happy. Nowadays, if people don't have Wi-Fi, they want to pull their hair out and just sitting at home complaining about, oh, I can't work and this and that. Like, I feel like all this resilience has been lost. Does it feel, so what do you feel like? Do you feel like because technology is at all-time high, things are quote-unquote easier now. Do you feel like that's made people softer?
I don't want to speak for people. I just want to speak for myself.
Okay.
The reason I felt that I was in a happy environment, Mark will tell you, I love dancing. And when the children were younger, I couldn't go out a great deal to clubs because I was looking after children. Mm-hmm. I went out on the odd occasion, but not that much. I was either studying, working, or looking after children. But at Christmas, at Easter, when we had time, family time, I'd always want to learn the new dances. So whatever was out there, I'd say to the kids, I'd say to whoever was there, show me that dance. Show me that dance. So when I go out there, I can do it. So what I'm trying to say to you is, we made ourselves happy, even if we couldn't do it in the way that the children nowadays, they're not happy unless they've got a £600 piece of equipment. In my day, you weren't getting it. So you make yourself happy with what you did have. You know what I mean? And sometimes it was music, or whatever it was. It wasn't, I don't know why we have spoilt our children. And I blame us and the ones coming up now. We are the ones that are spoiling them, because in my day, if I wanted an iPad, the first thing my dad would have said is, you have to go work for that.
True.
It wasn't just something that you automatically would have been given. I remember when I bought my first car for me and Nicola, I had an orange Mini. And I remember I paid £175 for this Mini. I saved my partner money and I went and I got this little Mini. It was my pride and joy. I had my little car seat in my little orange Mini, and me and that baby, I learned to drive. I remember the day that I was going for my test, my dad said, if you don't pass this, it's because of you and it's because of your nerves. It's not because you're not good enough. So the point I'm trying to say to you is, the difference between then and now, everything you had was a step closer. It was an achievement because you didn't just get it. You had to earn it. You had to work for it. We didn't just, and my children will tell you, every single one of them has passed through their dad's shop. They had to learn how to work, how to graft. If they wanted money to do things, they didn't just get it. They had to work for it. So every single one of them have had to work in the business and help out, because now they understand that things don't come easy, but they had to go through it. But it wasn't easy for any of us. But at the end of the day, we had to go through it, and we had to make ourselves happy in other ways, because you couldn't afford to do certain things. And as you could afford to do certain things, you were so busy, you just didn't have the time to do some of the things that you perhaps would have done when you were in your early 20s, because you're busy with work, you're busy with studying. Because if I stand up and give a 5-minute speech, just know I have studied and done what I need to do for probably a couple of hours. I don't just go and not put the work in. So you ring me at 3 o'clock in the morning, 9 times out of 10, I'm up. Because it's just something I do. Last night, I was up. I had to do something for a telly program today. Last night, I was up studying for it today to show myself approved. I do not just expect it to happen. I work towards it, even at my age. Even now, I do not go into things without preparing.
Yeah, pre-planning. So,
what are you going to say? It depends what you're going to say.
Nah, because where I'm going now is to the politics.
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah, so
the transition into politics. I wanted to.
You've gone through the school system. We know about your personal life. Got children now. Where did the politics, from being a nurse to getting into politics? Tell us as much detail as you can. How did that journey start? What was the spark? How did it happen?
Complete fluke. I had a manager called, I've forgotten her name now. I had a manager at the time in the Royal College of Nursing. And in the 1 week, the manager at the Royal College of Nursing, the director, asked me if I'd be interested in going into local politics. And I remember at the time, I'd got young kids, the house was upside down. There is no way I am going into politics. Where am I going to find time? The manager at work had mentioned it. She said, Paulette, I can see you in politics. Now, I filled the application form in to apply to go on the panel to become a counsellor. And I went to London to work. I was with the Royal College of Nursing. I went to Oxford Street. I was working. I was away for a couple of days and I came back. On the way back, they'd got the form at regional office and they rang me up and they said, would you be prepared to come for an interview? So I thought, I'll give it a go, but I didn't think I'd get anywhere. So I went for the interview because the point I want to raise now, not enough of our young people, especially African and Caribbean people, are showing interest to go into politics. Politics is not easy, but we have to, the next generation have to start coming through. And at this moment in time, they're not coming through. And one of my pleas today is, while you're doing what you're doing, consider going into politics. It's hard. You may find it quite torturous at times, but if you get it right, it will be the best move you've ever made. So going back to my story, I filled in the forms and I got the interview. Blow me down. They put me on the panel after the interview. And they then said to me that I could apply towards to become a counsellor. And at first, I didn't apply for anything, not for anything. Carried on with my career, attended some of the meetings, a little bit like Keisha's doing, attended some of the meetings, but didn't actually get into it in any depth at first. And then the one day somebody phoned me and said, there's a position in Answorth Wood. I went to Answorth Wood Girls' School. The position was in Answorth Wood, 10 minutes from where my parents lived. And they said, we want to put you forward for selection for a position. I went to the selection meeting, and that's another story within itself, which I'm not going to share. And then I got selected as a counsellor in that ward. So I got selected and then elected within 5 weeks. At that time, you guys were youngsters. Everybody was helping me with leafleting, knocking doors. This is where all of you guys roped in.
Can I just interject quickly?
Yeah.
Because this is some Birmingham history now. You know, there's a rapper. He's my favourite rapper, actually, from Birmingham.
Yeah.
Mitch.
Yeah.
You know Mitch Stephen, innit?
Yeah, of course.
All right. When Mitch was about 14, yeah. When you were doing your campaign, your first campaign, I paid him and another one of my friends at the time to fly out around the area. And both, you're now an MP and he's now signed. Yeah. I've always wanted to say that little, you know what I mean? Because he's now like a famous rapper from the city. Yeah, and you've gone on to be an MP.
Yeah.
But you both had that connection from young, from back in them days. I always wanted to say that, but carry on anyway.
But I became an MP in Answorth Wood. And as you know, as they would say, the rest is history. I became an MP in Answorth Wood. Not an MP, sorry. I became a counsellor in Answorth Wood. It wasn't easy because I gave up being a nurse a few years in because I went in 2004. Yeah. And then in 2008-9, I gave up nursing more or less completely, bar the odd shift or what have you. And I carried on rearing the family and doing the council work. In 2000 when did my grandmother die? 2013, 14, I was deselected from Answorth Wood. But after a lot of support from community people, I then got reselected not in Answorth Wood, but I then got back onto the panel. And then the boundaries changed and one thing or another. And I went into the Ollie ward after that. But I was also by this time a cabinet member. So I held the largest portfolio, not just in Birmingham, but in Western Europe, looking at adult social care and health. So my love for health and plus social care and the well-being services, I looked after it. I had the governance responsibility. I had to make sure that the numbers added up and looked after that service. It was a tough gig, but I did that for 7 years. And during lockdown, many people will say they were on furlough and what have you. I have never worked so hard in my life. I was doing 17-hour days because of the portfolio, the brief that I held and the responsibility that I had. And at that time also, I also was involved with something called the Local Government Association. So I was doing podcasts for them, similar to this, where we were learning to use Zoom, and we were learning to ask questions to expert witnesses. So I was doing all of that, as well as all the work I was doing for the local council as a councillor. And then and then Christmas last year, and Mark will tell you all, I was a real big advocate of the vaccine. I'm not going to sit here.
Like that,
They may not like it, but I was and I used to go out and promote it and champion it. And last year, after I'd had my vaccines, I developed COVID, and I was ill, very ill. To be honest, I don't know what I would have been like if I hadn't have had the vaccines, because I've never felt so ill in all my life after I'd had the vaccines and I caught COVID. But anyway, while I was recovering from COVID on the 7th of January this year, I was still a cabinet member. I was still doing my role, but something kept saying something is coming. And you know me, Mark, I am a Christian, and I do believe that sometimes when God is about to promote you, he's growing you, he's teaching you patience, he's teaching you humility, he's making sure that you're ready for the next move. And so on the 7th of January this year, unfortunately, we lost the last MP, Jack Dromey, and he passed away. And someone phoned me and said, Paulette, have you heard that Jack Dromey has passed away? And I said, no. I was shocked, because I'd only spoken to him just before Christmas, and he was just so full of life. He was a brilliant man, and he was really kind, and he used to give me a kiss, mwah, mwah, hello, Paulette, and then in the next breath, he'll give me a list of things to do. But he was that sort of man, and I really got on well with him. But when things are going to change in your life, what I'd like to tell your audience, it changes quickly. Things don't always have to take a long time to change. And so someone else phoned not long after. I was just getting over COVID, just started leaving the house. And they said to me, have you ever thought of becoming an MP? Now, to be honest, my children had always said to me, Mom, why are you not putting yourself forward for an MP? And I used to say to them, sure, me too old, that's, and that sort of thing. But secretly, I've always wanted, but I never thought, I think that, if I'm being honest, that I would ever get it. And so when this person sort of said it to me, I said to him, no, I haven't thought of it. And he said, well, why not? And something just clicked in my brain and said, well, why not? And at that point, I made up my mind I was going to try. Yeah. And before I tried, I spoke to my husband, because audience, something I have to say to you, whenever you're going for promotion, do not leave your family behind you. Take them with you. And in everything I do, I discuss it with the family. We've got an Hamilton's WhatsApp group. If I want to see my son, who's always busy, I say to him,
no, you're always busy.
I say to him, come to the house, I need to talk, or whatever. But anyway, we had the discussion with the family, and I said to them, look, I want to do this, but I need your support. It's going to mean I'm not going to be around as much, and all the usual. And everybody, yeah, man, yeah, we'll help. And they were there. And during the campaign, they were there. And I remember the night I got selected, the house exploded. And I rang my mum and dad and I said to them, I've got selected for this. And my dad said, I knew you'd do it. I don't know what you was worried about. I knew you'd do it. And it was a good night, Wednesday, the 27th of January. Anyway, by Saturday, the 29th of January. So with the positive, people always remember you have to deal with the negative. By Saturday, the 29th of January, I lost my dad and he passed away. I think he died about 9:10. And when I went into the house, I knew he wasn't well. And I just knew deep down when I was driving to Answorth, I knew I was hoping I'd see his eyes open, but I didn't. And he passed away. So I had to go through the campaign knowing that I'd lost my dad and he wasn't going to see me become an MP if I got it. And that was the hardest bit of doing this, is the fact that my dad, who has always been the person that has taught me some of the values that I hold, all of the values that I hold, and has always been there in the background, supporting, trying to do his best in his limited space, and so be my mom. He wasn't there to see me enter the ultimate space, which is Parliament. And that was the hardest bit of becoming an MP, the fact that my dad was not there to enjoy it with us. But saying that, we had a lovely day. I was sworn in and we had a lovely meal after. And the family... If
you're on Patreon, you can watch that as well.
Yeah, and the family just really enjoyed their time. And my new path started at that point. And next question, I'll leave it at that.
Oh, yeah. All right, so just before you do that, Stephen, so that's how you became an MP?
Yeah, that's how I became an MP.
You're the first black and the first woman MP from Birmingham.
And I have to be honest with you, being the first black and being the first woman, it's not, even though I'm absolutely delighted, it shouldn't be. I shouldn't be the first, considering since the Windrush generation, people have been coming into Birmingham, been in politics, working, doing things. But I am the first.
And your name's carved in the history books.
Yeah, and I won't be the last. Yeah. Being in politics is not always easy, especially when you see the chaos and the car crash of the last few months that has been going on.
Wait. Let's do it. Go on.
Because that was a nice transition into my next question.
Yeah, go
on. It's one of the pre-prepared ones, so it's on a bit TV-ish.
Go on.
Basically, do you feel that as you have served your community for years on the front line of the health sector, does this experience set you apart from other MPs who might have had a more privileged or more sheltered entry into politics?
Absolutely. The experience that I take into politics, it's one that you can't bottle, you can't grow it. As you know, I'm now a doctor. My name is Dr. Paulette Hamilton, MP.
Respect on my name.
And that is for some of the work I've done through my time at Aston University. I was given an honorary doctorate and I was very humbled and privileged by it. But I've done a lot in the years that I have been around. But my time in nursing, my time in local government, my family, my local community, the people that have been there cheerleading me on. Anybody who knows me knows that this isn't just me. I take with me the community, I take with me my family, I take with me the history that I've brought from childhood and what I've learned in nursing. I just take with me everything that what has come from the past. So when I'm in Parliament and things are happening and when I speak, people, they say to me, oh my God, how do you do it? How do you do it? Trust me, those green benches are one of the most nerve-wracking things out.
It's the truth, because
but you have to do it because you have to represent.
No, that's true, because when my mum went into Parliament that first day, and when you go into that room with the green seats,
yeah,
what did they call that room?
House of
House of
Commons.
House of Commons, that is
Yeah,
the thoughts.
and the Labour Party were very kind
Yeah.
to the family. Shout out to the Labour Party. They had like a tour guide and all this stuff. They treated us like royalty. And then we ended up going to see my mum get sworn in.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all like these green, you see that room.
You see it
innit?
on TV,
You see
yeah.
that room from a kid,
Mm.
and you just get like these goosebumps. But it's like, that's like this. That's like the pinnacle in it for like,
Where the country's ran.
it's like us being on getting a deal with Spotify or something.
That's
Like, that's like the pinnacle of that world, innit? So to actually see it up and close. But
you never get tired of being in a place like that. And you always remember that it's a privilege. And if it wasn't for the people that voted for you, you would not be there. People cannot take that place for granted, but we need more. We need more people like myself with very humble upbringing, actually trying to get into places like that. I do believe my age is an advantage now that I'm in there, but I believe we need more men, we need more women, we need younger women, we need older women, because this world is not just made of a box. It's all different shapes and sizes. So you need all different types of people from all different backgrounds. I have met some phenomenal people since I've started. I have worked with some excellent, some of the MPs. Do not look at what you hear, the baying and the and all that noise.
you were all over. Well, not you. You're the leader, Kia, and they were all over social media the last couple of days.
Yeah, because of our.
But Kia, I do believe Kia's the next prime minister.
Well, I hope he is, but
I believe he is.
You know, at the end of the day, I've gone into Parliament at a really important time, and I believe that change is coming. And God allowed me to go in and to see that change at first hand, so I can say to other people, look. People may tell you can't do this. People may say you're not good enough. But please don't listen to the naysayers. Keep going, keep pushing, keep driving, because whatever that dream is that you have, it will happen.
So I'm going to just ask you slightly off topic before you come in, Stephen. So since you've become an MP, it came with a lot of press and media. Now, there are certain media that, I believe that they've been a bit harsh on you, especially coming from the city. It does upset me that papers can sometimes be unfair. Do you see what I mean? They can be very unfair. It can almost come across like an attack. And we're in media, so we know this.
Yeah.
It can be a bit unfair. Now, I've found myself, I can't look at comments in regards to you. I can't look at comments. Even today, I almost DM'd somebody who wrote something negative. I almost DM'd the person. I said, you can't do that, Mark. You can't do that.
Trolls,
Boris, Liz, all these people are hounded. I think being a politician is a thankless job. I think you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. How do you continue to push forward with all these naysayers and paper? I'm going to listen to what Stephen said before we recorded, so we're not going to say the name. But how do you continuously move forward and ignore these attacks? And so, let's be honest, a lot of them have, just seem like an attack. And I'm not saying that just because you're my mom.
Unjustified, man.
How do you deal with that?
It hurts. So what I found myself doing, one, I don't read what they say on social media. Sometimes the girls might say something and then I have a little look, but otherwise I don't look at what they say on social media. Some of the attacks, because it's on my integrity, it hurts. I'm not going to lie, it hurts. But you know something? Still I rise. And at the end of the day, there are so many people in the community that I am helping. If I allow what certain people say about me to stop me from doing that, then they're going to kill my joy. And they're not going to kill my joy because I'm where I want to be, climbing. and I'm not going to allow what they say to be the true story. So the stories, I won't sit here and tell you.
We don't need to get into them.
No, the stories, as I said, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they don't at times hurt you, but I have to be honest with you, half of them I don't read. And what I've learned to do is just get on with what I need to do, and they get on with what they need to do, and I leave it at that. I just make sure that I do the right thing.
What I will say, matter of fact, Stephen, go ahead.
No, go on, because mine's back to politics. Okay.
All right. So what I will say is, especially like in your earlier days, I believe that when you got into politics, you overextended yourself. I believe that you found it hard to say no.
Yeah.
Which can be difficult at times. I'm still learning that myself.
Yeah.
And I feel like some things you didn't say no to.
Yeah.
You tried to help people, and a lot of those things, well, not a lot, some of those things came back to bite you.
Yeah.
So it's almost like your good nature because I remember telling you years ago, it's not everything you need to be at as Paulette Hamilton, but you would still, try and be
support.
Even if it was someone just starting out, you try to help them on their journey. You see what I mean? And I feel like that further shown me that, you can't overextend yourself with a lot of, because a lot of individuals, and I learned this from you, there's people that will see you, know you, and, they'll attack you. They will attack you. It'll be people that it won't be strangers.
Nope.
It'll be people that that will attack you and try to pull you down as much as they can and destroy you as much as they can. That's why I wanted to ask you that question, because I feel like that plays a large part in politics.
But
you guys have
Mark, you've got to understand, you know more than most. You and Stephen know more than most. We have a happy home. And once I shut that front door, when do you hear me talk about politics? Unless we're having a small discussion. It's about the family. It's about what's going on. It's about what we're having for dinner. It's about where we're planning as a family to perhaps go on holiday. It's never about the attacks and people that are out there, because we don't let them in. And the only advice I can give to you is they only have relevance if you allow them in.
Yes.
And they are not allowed in. They're not allowed into my life. They're not allowed into my home. And they're not allowed to break my relationships with people I love. Okay. I can invite you guys round and we have a barbecue and we sit there and we play a bit of music and it's just you guys, myself, the others, you know exactly who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
We have a whale of a time. We have a brilliant evening, sometimes finishing late because it's a happy home and you don't hear people bringing in the political things. So even though sometimes what you read hurts, as I've always said to you, Mark, don't read it.
Yeah, I had to, but you know that even I think on this with the Express Truth journey, there's been things that I've personally had to learn.
Yeah.
And I have looked at you and you've helped me as well in knowing how to maneuver and how to move in the future.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of people that want to see bad things.
100%.
They want to see negative things, and it's very hard to, once you put yourself on a public forum, it can be hard because as Stephen, like, you find yourself, you don't know whether to cry or be angry.
Yeah, but Mark, if you let them through, they've won, haven't they? You know what I always do? I have a habit. I will warn, I will say something to somebody or what have you. If they continue to persist, that's where I'm done. I'll never be rude to anybody. At the moment, I've got this person that thought a lot of them. And in the summer, they literally embarrass me in public, cut me dead, embarrass me. But what I've learned is that person must be hurting. So why should I allow that insult? Why should I carry that insult and allow that insult to hurt me? Leave them to it. It's their
And that's
issue.
the best way. Not
It's not
so
my issue.
What I was saying, I'm gonna pass this
Yeah.
on to other people as well. No response is still a response.
Exactly.
I've learned that so much in the past year.
Silence is deafening.
Silence is deafening,
Yeah.
and sometimes we don't need to give everything a reaction. But Stephen, what's that question?
Yo, you know, I got a few, you know.
Yeah, go
I got
on
a
then,
few.
Stephen.
All right, you know what?
Because we are wrapping up soon, so
I know probably 2-3 more. This is it.
Yeah.
go on.
Sounds very news round now, but yeah. Being of Jamaican heritage yourself,
Yeah.
did the news of Jamaica banning all music and TV that can be deemed to glorify drug use and violence, how did that news hit you? Was it the first year?
No. I've heard it. I heard it.
So it's with the PMP.
Yeah,
yeah, you can tell them
PLP, I
after.
was with them the other day, but
Okay.
I heard that bit of news. But I'm gonna be honest. Have you been to Jamaica recently? Because a lot of that music wasn't on telly anyway. So I was a little bit surprised
You
when
have
there
to
was.
go out and find it.
You have to go and find
Yeah.
it. It isn't on the. You
It's
remember
not
when we used to
mainstream.
go
Come
to
back,
Mama?
yeah.
You couldn't find that type of music there anyway. So
Yeah.
I thought when they're talking about banning it, do they mean satellite telly? they're banning it?
radio and telly.
Right. So to be honest, I've never gone to Jamaica and heard a lot of that music on telly. I have heard it on the radio, but only certain types of it. But they're a very conservative country. So when I heard it, I have to be honest, it didn't surprise me.
Okay.
I've got to be honest with you. It didn't surprise me. I was because I don't like some of that music myself. But again,
It's a bit
that's
heavy.
my
Some of
age.
it,
No,
some of it's a bit heavy.
I'm not gonna lie though. I'm not gonna lie. Cartel of my boss, you know.
Yeah, well, some of
Mommy,
it-
you like a few as well, mommy. Not,
I do.
not the hardcore
No,
stuff.
not the hardcore. No. You know, but Vibes Cartel sing the Clark's Boots one.
Yeah,
don't they?
man.
Yeah, well, that, from his old days, some of his old music, I used to really, really like it.
Just
but
the woman underneath. And all
yeah,
that.
I
That's
don't
a
like
bit-
that
that's a
sort
bit
of thing. I
hardcore.
think it's
I just played the
disrespecting
clean
women.
version for you.
You know, some of it is just disrespectful of women, and I think we have to clean up our act as a community.
100%. But do you feel like a similar scheme could be beneficial to the UK?
Banning music.
Mm.
Well, I don't think that kind of music can be played on our airways. Where have you ever heard it? Some of
True,
them
but
foolishness,
if-
what you hear in Jamaica, nowhere. They would no way would they allow that in the UK. No. So I don't even think it's an issue because I think the regulators have already
The
stopped
watershed's
all
heavy,
of that.
man.
Yeah. You wouldn't
That
have that in
watershed's
the
heavy.
And if they didn't have it in the UK, I would be fighting for it to happen. Why should you mess up our kids' head with some of the foolishness that I hear them talking about?
But you know their argument though, especially like if you just keep it UK for a moment.
Yeah.
And we talk about drill.
Yeah.
Because you remember they had the whole issues and they were trying to ban drill and everything
yeah.
a couple of years ago. And Krypton Conan were one of the advocates fighting against it, etc. Like, no, this is how we make money and all of that. But they're always gonna argue that it's entertainment, they're gonna say. This isn't me defending it, this is what they'd say. And B, they're gonna say, oh, this is our experience. I'm just
Yeah.
telling you the story of how I came up.
Which is true because back in the day when we were coming up, it was like the cultural reggae. And then you had the original type dancehall before it got totally out
Crazy.
of
Yeah,
hand.
it just used to be
Yeah.
a spring, like it would leave things to the imagination.
Yeah.
You're talking about Shabba Ranks days.
Yeah.
Yeah. But now it's just they've gone full.
So I went out with my husband and wore a yellow dress. We went to see Yellow Man. My husband went mad. Why are you wearing yellow? And he said, are you glorifying that type of music? At the end of the day, that type of music is actually quite tame compared to some of what I'm hearing
it's
now.
crazy now.
I have to admit, perhaps this is where I'm showing my age. I'm only 21 and a half, you know. But I do think some of that music, Stephen, is too much, especially for our youngsters.
Come with the next
Still in
one.
fashion. I'm just warming up now. All right, people, this is going to come out. It's coming out on Friday, isn't it?
Friday, yeah.
All right, so it's Thursday today. So if you can speak about this.
Yeah.
Following the announcement of Prime Minister Liz Truss shocking resignation after 45 days. in power. Should the Tories just call it a day? And surely this drastic move would only weaken their support with the public.
Right. Liz Truss comes into power. They spend all summer fighting to get a new leader, completely ignoring the country while they are doing this. They then get Liz Truss. They put her on the pedestal. Liz Truss is our new leader. Within, our queen dies, so we then bury the queen. 7 days later, her and Kwasi Kwarteng come out with this kamikaze budget. They managed to crash the economy. Interest rates rise. Inflation rises. Taxes go up. And then she says, I'm sorry. In between everything, she sacks the gentleman. She sacks Kwasi Kwarteng. She brings in a new chancellor. She then, as everything is reversed. In the meantime, the whole economy is crashing. They're not stable. They have no direction. They have no vision. They don't know where they're going. They're faced inwardly at each other. And they are forgetting that people out here on the pit face are going to food banks. They don't know how they're going to pay their energy bills. They've now cut it down from 2 years to 6 months where they're going to offer support. And they are still arguing. What I've seen over the last 3-4 months is despicable because people out here are struggling and they are in there fighting amongst themselves. So you ask me the question, do I feel...
What me say?
What you say? Do you feel...
I'm getting mesmerized by your answer.
Yeah.
Hold on. Do I feel like the Tories would have weakened their... What me I say now? We forget now.
Look, go back to the thing. Go back to the thing. Don't worry. Go back to the thing.
Do we feel like the Tories would have weakened their support from the public?
Absolutely. Because I believe that everything they stand for has crashed in the last 2 months. I know we've had the issues with Ukraine, but they have everything that has happened in this country has been created at number 10 with Liz Truss.
So how do we feel like the UK would benefit from a Labour-led government?
I believe Labour are starting to produce, they have produced some costed plans. And I believe going forward, if we have an election, a general election, it would give Labour the platform to put forward some of those costed plans. They've talked about small businesses and the fact that going forward, they want to look at the business rate system and how they can develop that and reduce that. They want to look at the levels of the rates that people are paying in business, raising the level before the threshold before you start paying different types of business rates. I can't remember the name of it. They've also got the new energy company that they're talking about, GB Energy, that they've talked about. They've talked about really increasing what they're doing with wind farming and solar panels and just changing. In my humble opinion, I'm tired and it's late, but in my humble opinion, the Labour Party are really thinking ahead. There is a blue sky between what Labour are saying and what the Conservatives are saying. And I think it's time we put it to the country. We can put forward some of our costed plans to the country and they decide.
100%.
All right. You got any more?
I got some more, man, but
Go on.
I'm not. You sure?
Fire after. Give it 2 more.
All right, you want 2 more?
Yeah.
It's funny. Well, funny. It's interesting that you mentioned that because that leads into my next question. I know many people are currently in a state of panic as every day we're being told about the energy crisis and rising inflation. I'm just wondering, could you give it a bit of breakdown for the average Brit who may not understand all the flash words that they hear in the news?
When you say a breakdown of what? At the moment, the simple way to put it,
there you go.
Your energy bills will be rising. What the government are doing, because the rate,
Mama, just talking to the mic, please.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
The gas companies at the moment, because of what's happening partly in Ukraine, gas has gone up, right? And there's not as much supply of gas, which has caused it to go up on the open market. What has happened is they are able to charge more money. That money is creating massive profits for our energy companies. So that's why the Labour Party and now the government are talking about the one-off windfall tax. So what they do is they're taxing these energy companies on their profits, right? That's what they want to do. But the issue here is the poor Joe, the poor man, woman that's out there, whereas before they were paying £20 per week for gas or electricity, they're now going to be paying 60. What the government has said is they've put a cap on that. So you only pay a certain amount as long as you don't overuse it each year. So the cap they've put on it is they've said no household should pay more than £2,500. So in this October bill that many houses will be receiving, October, November, they will find that they have had quite an increase in their bill. But what the government is doing is giving them subsidies to help them. So if the bill is £100, say, and I'm just giving you a for instance, they'll probably help them with £40. So they're not paying as much.
Okay, so with the government subsidizing, is that eventually going to lead to an increase in tax?
It's already led to an increase in tax
Already?
because the markets have got scared and they've increased the tax rate. So the tax rates were 0.1% and 1.2. That's gone up. I think it's about 4 or 5% at the moment, and they're looking at it climbing even higher. So it's already gone up. But that happened because Liz Truss said that she wanted to cut taxes for the most wealthy, and the market, she spooked the market. She did not get the permission or from the market to say you can do that, because remember, it's all coming from borrowing because we're in debt up to our neck.
To our eyeballs.
Yeah. You got another one?
Or
is that you?
I got another one.
So people,
all right,
I'm going to just say, people, we're going into a very, very difficult time, but there is help out there for you. So what you need to do is find out what support you are entitled to and make sure you claim it. Most people should get it automatically, but sometimes you may not, for whatever reason, it may not have dropped in, you may not have seen it. Please, there is help for you out there. Use it, because it is going to be a difficult time, but it doesn't mean that we give up and die. It means we've just got to go through.
Because pressure busts pipes, but also brings diamonds.
Yeah.
So it depends. They will always tell you about the gloom.
Yeah.
If that even a bad word, they say doom and gloom. But a lot of millionaires are made in times like this.
Absolutely.
A lot of people emerge from a lot of millionaires came from the crash in 2008.
Yeah.
A lot of people found gaps in the market, and so you can use this time. You can either look at it as, oh, I'm doomed, or my back's against the wall, or you can use it. But you still have
to take precautions. I agree with you, but I would say to people, take precautions. They're telling you, make sure you've got candles out there if you can.
Oh, guys.
Make sure you've got torch. Make sure you've got torches.
You gave me a torch?
Yes, I did last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, it's going to be there somewhere, but I don't remember. But yeah,
torches. Make sure people have said candles and other forms of eating if you need it. As I said, I believe we will get through this, and I'm a bit like Mark. I believe that when you get hard times, you got to go through to come through.
Well, look at your story.
100%.
Look, we've been on here almost 2 hours now.
Wow.
And your story is a story of just that. Because remember, this is what I say when it comes to especially black people. We've always been in a recession. We've always been in a recession. So we can rough it out if we have to,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that, you know, the gas and electric situation, we may have to just do things slightly different. You just got to adapt to the times.
Yeah.
It's not easy, but we got to adapt.
Yeah, we do. And I'm not going to sit here and say it's not going to be tough, but you will come through. You
course.
just have to make sure you make the adjustments that are needed in the family to make sure you get through this difficult time.
That's it. That's it. Stephen.
Cost of living. So you have to live no matter the cost. Last one.
Yeah, go
I
on.
promise.
Right.
What's this I'm hearing about the rolling blackouts?
Well, that's why I talked about the candles.
Yeah, I know. That's what I
Because-
said I'll ask.
Well, the thing is, I've not been told as a definitive that is going to happen.
Okay.
Because we've had nothing in Parliament to tell us that. But what I've been hearing from energy companies and others is that in January, February, when we're at the peak of using gas or the electricity, that because they're getting less supplies from abroad because of what's going on, we may have to endure power cuts between 4 and 7 o'clock. Now, I'm not saying that is definitely going to happen. I'm saying this is what is being muted, and I'm hearing people talking about quite widely, actually. So what I would say to you is be prepared.
Yep.
But they're selling, you know what they're selling now? What I've seen, you got to spend a bit of money on it though. They're selling like units that have like 4 or 5 plugs in them, sockets,
Yeah.
portable units.
Like a portable generator.
Yeah. Like a little
Oh, that you
small
can
one
plug stuff into.
that you could actually plug an electric thing and it will say like you've got like 10 hours
Okay.
on it.
Okay.
And I'm very
Might have to invest, man.
I'm thinking about investing in one
My feet
because
got a
once I
promise.
buy that, I can look at where the leakage is coming from and just plug them things into that. Simple.
So,
They're not gonna. This is what I'm saying. Adapt.
yeah.
Gotta adapt.
Well, it
As
all
I said,
depends on you.
there's a lot being said at the moment. And at the moment, as you can see, because of what's happened, unfortunately, with Liz Truss, the government is rolling back on a lot of the promises it's given. So we have to keep our eyes and ears open and understand what it is the government are going to do once they've sorted themselves out until there is a next election. I don't know. I can't
Like,
answer that
They
question.
said, because I keep my eye on this. They said that we would be safe for 2 years on rises.
Mhm.
Now it's 6 months.
Yeah.
It
Because
changed.
they've
So
rolled-
they
they've
changed it
rolled
back.
Well, they said they were going to stop the rise of the tax rate. People earning over 150, they wouldn't have to go up to 25%, and they would stay at 20. They've had to roll back on that. They've had to roll back on people going from 20 to 19. They've had to roll back on that. They've had to roll back on people coming into the country and, they would get tax-free benefits. They've had to roll back on that. And it goes on. They've had to roll back on everything
Basically.
she's announced. It's basically scrapped what she's announced. But what she announced spooked the market and has meant taxes have got higher and interest rates and
I know, man. I feel
and inflation is going up.
it's really
And, because of what she's done, our mortgages will be going up and, people coming off base rate mortgages, set mortgages,
Yeah.
they will have to pay more money. The average, they've said, is about £113 in areas like Birmingham. It's not an easy time.
it's not at all. It's not.
But we will get through.
We
and
get
that
through
would be
this.
my positive word. It's gone up there. I believe the next 6 to 12 months will be tough. But we've had this in the 80s. We had it again a little bit in the 90s. And it's come again. But I believe now it's worse than ever.
It is worse. It is worse. But
We're going to see the resilience of this new generation now.
Yeah.
that's it. That's
And
it.
that's my concern. Because the new generation have not really, back in the day, we had to use oil lamps and gas heaters.
I still remember them, man. My grandma
Can you
had them
remember that?
in
Yeah.
Jamaica. Yeah, man. Look on it. Oh, my
And a
Lord.
lot of the youngsters have never, I don't even know if they've seen one.
I remember them.
You know?
I remember
I'll
them.
give you this before we go. We're speaking about back in the day. America, a woman, she was filming her daughter because I think she went to her grandma's house. The old rotary phones.
Yeah.
She was like, "Is this a real phone?" She's like, "Yeah, dial it." Oh, your phone's ringing, answer it. They've never seen it in their life. They didn't know what it was.
Yeah, yeah.
No one know cell phones.
Yeah, technology, man.
Man.
Moved on. But
Show a kid a video now. Show you a video now.
yeah, they don't know what that
They'll
is.
think it's a
What it is.
paperweight, man.
Yeah, they don't know what that is.
Right.
But thank you for coming in.
Dr.
Yeah.
Hamilton, MP.
Dr. Hamilton MP.
I'll put respect on your name. It's been a pleasure.
It's a very good
Tell
story.
Kia Starmer we would like to have a conversation.
You never know, especially when we're up for
We need to get
election.
Kia before he becomes Prime
Before and
Minister.
after, hopefully.
Well,
Hopefully
probably
after we can
after it's
go
difficult.
to number 10.
Oh,
You never know. But okay, thank you for coming on the show. We definitely appreciate it. Is there anything else you would like to add?
Any final thoughts for the listeners?
Any final thoughts? Anything at all?
Oh, I'd just like to say to the listeners, thank you. Thank you for listening to me. I appreciate each and every one of you. Some of you may agree with some of what I've said. Some may not agree with what I've said. But just thank you for listening, because it's been my story. And I hope you found it interesting. And one day I'll probably write a book with more details.
Oh, no, not one. Definitely that's coming.
Yeah.
A book, audio book,
I need honorable mention. in that.
documentary.
Honorable mention.
Yeah. Documentary, probably even a movie. You never know where it could go.
Yeah,
We'll see.
we'll
Because
produce
you're the
it, man.
first, innit? So,
100%.
Stephen, you got anything else you would like to?
Just thanks for coming on again. Beautiful conversation. I learned a lot about history, politics, everything, man. And I'm sure it's going to keep our listeners engaged and entertained.
And I'd love to see even one or two of your listeners, if I've inspired them to take a look at politics as a career going forward. It'd be really good to see people go into politics.
If they do, hopefully
Yeah.
they come and share their story as well.
And
Yeah, that's
you
it.
know, even local politics, go into local councils, understand what it means to be a local politician compared to do the role on a national level. People need to start coming forward, because we're never going to change things if we sit on the sidelines.
Yeah, that's the truth. So
100.
that's it. Thank you for coming in,
Okay.
and all the best in the future.
Okie coke.